The next video we're going to take a look at is by Chen, previously known as Roaming Millennial, before she got her job at Blaze TV. I used to actually watch her content back in the day. Back in the day, when I was, a reactionary, when I was slipping down the alt-right pipeline, I found her channel because she was, speaking out against the SJWs that were ruining society. And I kind of liked her content, and I subscribed, and then I hadn't heard anything about her or watched her in a long time until recently when I saw that she had been picked up by Blaze TV and was on this very far right-wing media outlet. And I kind of wanted to take a look at this video because it's entitled "Conservatives Are Undateable, Too Cruel for Love, Say Progressives." And it got me curious because I want to know what they have to say, because a lot of the things that conservatives tend to believe, and the values they tend to hold don't seem to be very compatible with a more progressive society. So maybe there's a point to that, but I'm also curious if this is just more of the same conservative oppression Olympics, where they try to say that straight white conservative Christian men are the most oppressed minority in the country. So I'm kind of curious. It's a shorter video, so I'm going to play it on normal speed. Let's take a look. Let's see what they have to say.
So first up, have you ever heard of the Bold Type? It's a show.
No.
Okay, well, apparently this show, which I have no interest in watching, they have a relationship happen between a conservative white woman and this queer black woman, and it's, meant to be about how you can overcome political differences if you love each other.
I'm so confused at the label of conservative white woman.
I know.
Anyway,
So you're confused at the label of conservative white woman. I'm confused about the label of a queer black woman being in a relationship with a conservative white woman, because most conservatives, now less and less each day, I'll admit, but most conservatives aren't gay and don't support gay rights and shit like that. So I'm kind of confused. I don't know what show this is that they're referencing, but that's the label I'm confused about. What do you mean you're confused about the label conservative white woman? It's a white woman who's conservative. That's not very confusing.
Anyway, the message is supposed to be about how you can date
is my volume not up?
people even with political differences, which is a surprisingly wholesome message from a show that seems like it's very pro-social justice. So, I mean, hats off to them. I don't think I'm the target audience for that show, but still it's nice, when other places are promoting just coming together and looking past politics. Mary Sue is not about that life, though. They are not happy with this message. They think, no, conservatives.
So you can date people that have different politics from you on certain issues, is the thing. If you disagree on, let's say, taxes, for example, like what the tax rate should be in certain instances, sure, you can be with somebody that disagrees with you. But if you disagree with somebody on whether or not gay people should have rights, or the validity of trans people, or the rights that people of color should have in this country, things of that nature, I would suggest not dating that person because you're just simply not compatible with them. But you can date somebody that has different politics than you on certain issues, but there are large hot button issues that being with a person that disagrees with you on large things like the ones I listed, and there are others, would create a level of uncompatibility in the relationship that wouldn't be conducive to having a healthy relationship. And you shouldn't be in a relationship if it's not healthy.
can't date them, can't be friends with them. Why try? They're just terrible. So we have this article from someone who is, if you're a Trump supporter, I wouldn't try being friends with them. It says the problem with the bull type romanticizing relationships with conservatives, all too fitting in the wake of the notorious Harper's Magazine open letter decrying so-called cancel culture. Freeform's The Bull Type took a surprising route in the second half of its 4th season. Wow, the show is in its 4th season. I've never heard of it before. Setting out to humanize.
To be fair, I've never heard of it either, but I don't watch TV. I don't have cable. I watch YouTube.
Eva, a conservative white woman. Like, you don't need to humanize it. Like, they're people. Like, what?
Not in the eyes of the Mary Sue.
Yeah, they need to be humanized because they're so far from that naturally. Okay, so on top of the show's bizarre character redemption arc for Eva, it paired her with Kat Edison, a queer black woman whose entire identity throughout the series has been rooted in social justice activism. So they're mad that they're trying to have a redemption arc for this despicable, non-human, conservative white woman. It says
they never said that they were non-human. See, this is what I was talking about. This right here is what I was talking about when these people try to say that conservative white people are the most oppressed minority and they are constantly dehumanized. Nobody dehumanizes white people. They dehumanize the fuck out of black people in this country, that's for sure. Queer people, trans people, gay people, what have you. Those people are dehumanized all the fucking time. White people, especially conservative white people, certainly fucking aren't. Jesus Christ, they're trying to push this annoying ass narrative and it pisses me off.
The show romanticizes the relationship between Eva and Kat despite their, quote, political differences, while failing to acknowledge that Eva's political differences are really deep, violent oppression. They're just coming out and saying, like, just violent and oppression. And I haven't seen the...
It depends on what conservative values she holds, but... the majority of conservatives hold values that are oppressive and have been used as violent political tools in the past. So it's not necessarily an inaccurate statement. Now, again, I'm not familiar with the character. I'm not familiar with the show, so I'm not sure what views this character in particular holds. But there are many conservative values that progressives view as oppressive and potentially violent.
Actual episodes, but I'm pretty sure that if this character is in a relationship with another person, she's not actually advocating genocide. Right? That's probably not
of course.
what the show is portraying.
No, just if you haven't caught on yet, it's probably she's like a fiscal conservative.
Yeah, or she voted for Trump or something.
She wants small government.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between being a fiscal conservative and voting for Trump. A lot of very, very hateful and violent people voted for the conservative candidate last election and are voting for them again during this election. But like I said earlier, there's a difference between being a fiscal conservative, which refers to taxation and the budget and economic policies, and having social political stances that are conservative. The social political stances are what can cause massive issues. I mean, there are some economic ones like healthcare and stuff like that, which you can disagree with somebody and still be marginally compatible with them. But and I'm not saying that this character believes this because they're in a lesbian relationship. If the queer doesn't mean like gender nonconforming. So I guess I'm making an assumption. But if they're not in a typical heterosexual relationship, let's go ahead and say that. Then they would not be socially conservative about that particular issue. There's a difference between the type of conservative that you're talking about and the type of conservative that the article is talking about.
Yeah, she wants lower taxes. That's the violent oppression. Both the relationship between the two characters and the writer's sympathetic portrayal of a conservative white woman. Why are they always mentioning the whiteness? Like, how is that relevant?
They love to bring up race, and it's.
Well, they mentioned that the queer woman was black. Maybe the race has a part to play in the narrative. I don't know, but there might be a point to it. It doesn't, just because a news outlet brings up or a media outlet brings up the race of an individual when they're reporting on it does not mean that they're trying to push some racial narrative. Maybe it could potentially be very relevant to the subject at hand.
Yes.
Yeah, her whiteness.
Yes.
who vocally supports and strives to advance bigoted, xenophobic, racist, and anti-environment policies, seem deeply at odds with the moral lessons the show.
So if this is true, if this particular character vocally supports and strives to advance bigoted, xenophobic, racist, and anti-environment policies, if that stuff is true about that particular character, then yeah, I would say that they have political differences that are deep and violent oppression. That would be accurate. If that's what this character actually holds, then yeah, it would be a valid accusation. It would be a valid point to make. And I don't know how somebody who would be more progressive, such as the queer black woman in this relationship, could consider themselves compatible with somebody that believes these things. If somebody is xenophobic, if somebody is fucking racist. Now, if they're racist, I doubt they would be in a relationship with a black woman. But perhaps their racism is directed towards another racial group. Such as brown people or xenophobic specific religious group, which ties into racism, because when most people have a problem with Muslims, they by extension have a problem with the brown people associated with that religion. So they kind of tie into each other. Anti-environmental policies directly affect people of color in America and other nations. Like, these things could be incredibly problematic. So maybe this article has a point, if these things are true.
Has always centered, and the values Kat has spent the past 4 seasons fighting for. An unlikely romance begins to bloom when Eva invokes, quote, free speech to protect Kat from losing her job after Kat rightfully criticizes Eva for her toxic stances and efforts to dehumanize immigrants, indigenous people, and marginalized communities. That's a lot of people to dehumanize.
That's something that conservatives do a lot. That's not unheard of. And I find it very strange that this show would create a narrative where a highly progressive woman of color would instantly become romantically attracted to a conservative person that has vehemently different views from them, simply because they took up for them using the banner of free speech to protect them from repercussions, justified or not, of calling out this kind of shit. It's really weird, and it seems very forced. Because I don't know anybody personally that would hold value similar to this cat character that would disregard their social and political stances and their opinions because somebody who vehemently disagrees with them on almost every one of those positions would just disregard them and be in a romantic relationship with that person simply because they stood up for them in one instance.
The workplace all at once. But so right here, I love how they say she invokes free speech as if that's like a right-wing dog whistle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it is. Freedom of speech is very important, but the people that use the free speech argument are the ones that are pushing reactionary and racist, hateful, xenophobic rhetoric, and then use the free speech argument to try and beat back any sort of criticism of their standpoint, saying, well, I'm free to express my opinion, you can't criticize me for it. Or when they lose their job because a business doesn't want to be associated with someone that has those kinds of values, they use the free speech argument to try and bite back against those types of actions taken by the company, citing free speech, despite the fact that, and I spoke about this in an earlier video, freedom of speech only applies to the government. The government cannot penalize you. The government cannot arrest you or anything of that nature for speaking your opinions. But private citizens and privately owned companies can.
From what this article is saying about Eva, it seems like she's wanting this SJW to keep her job, even though they have political differences. So right off the bat, she doesn't seem like that terrible a person, right? She seems
like someone who's principled.
Yeah.
Taking a reasonable stance once does not invalidate hateful rhetoric and hateful actions taken in the past. And I know this, I'm breaking one of the cardinal rules of the internet, but when Hitler was in power, He made healthcare more accessible to white Aryans in Germany. That doesn't make him a good person just because he did a good thing for certain people. Just because this character did a good thing in defending a person of color when they were at risk of losing their job for voicing their opinions, which, in my opinion, would have been considered hateful or inappropriate, and were defending themselves against words and actions by another individual at that company. Just because they did that doesn't necessarily make them a good person going forward, and it validate anything that they may have done in the past that was negative or hateful.
Yeah.
But of course, the people that are writing this, even though they're on Eva's side, disagree with those principles. They don't believe in free speech. They believe that Eva should not be allowed to speak.
Right.
Right. Whatever the progressive said here, I forget the lady's name. Kat said here, that was the correct speech. That was what was allowed.
She was in her right. Yeah. She should have called her out, probably committed a little bit of violence against her.
Oh, wow. So that's a hot take. So I guess this person is under the impression that progressives will always resort to violence when somebody does something they disagree with. I know that this is the narrative that they're trying to push with the whole BLM thing, where they're trying to characterize every single protest as a riot and trying to characterize each one of these demonstrations with violence, to try and invalidate them. But that doesn't mean that any time that a progressive comes in contact with views or opinions that they disagree with, that they'll resort to violence. They'll be vocal about it, sure, but that doesn't necessitate violence. Holy shit.
Because
it's not violence because of the power structure.
Yeah, and it's preemptive protection of marginalized people. It says, as the two spend more time together and their relationship develops, the bold type portrays Eva as courageous and forward-thinking. How dare they? And as if she genuinely cares about Kat, who is, again, a queer black woman directly harmed and often denied humanity by Eva's politics.
True. If this Eva character holds the views that they're saying they do and are and hold typically conservative views, that would not be an inaccurate statement for a queer black woman to be directly harmed and often denied humanity by conservative politics. That's not a lie.
Yeah, so it's like, if you're a conservative, I just want you to know that in the eyes of the Mary Sue, you are incapable of actually caring for someone who is black.
It's incapable, not uncapable. Uncapable, I don't believe, is a word. Go on.
Or LGBT, and you are actually trying to kill them, like violently oppress them.
I mean, the lack of introspection already in this article is like, she's talking about the futile act of humanizing Eva, while saying Eva is dehumanizing Kat. It's just like, dude, you have no
self-awareness.
You just like your mirrors probably don't work.
Yeah.
You don't have any in your home. I don't know. It's crazy.
You see, conservative politics do regularly dehumanize marginalized people. We see that with the BLM issue, where when a black person is killed by law enforcement, they have to do the "he was no angel" narrative, and they have to look into their past to find a way to justify the killing of a black person, rather than acknowledging that the system that's in place, the system of law enforcement, is inherently racist. There are inherently racist biases within this system, and it needs to be addressed. They don't want to make peace with that with themselves, so they have to justify the police's actions regardless of how unjustifiable they are. They also dehumanize and deny agency to LGBTQ people. To trans people in particular in this country. The country itself has gotten more and more progressive when it comes to gay and lesbian people, but there's a bunch of other people in that community that are routinely dehumanized and denied agency because of the way they identify or their sexual orientation. That's not an inaccurate statement to make. Conservatives routinely dehumanize and deny agency to marginalized people across this country in a myriad of ways. And for them to point that out and to say that it's at the very least strange that a queer woman of color would be in a relationship with another person that holds these views regardless of gender, that holds those views that routinely dehumanize and deny the agency of both herself for being queer and for being a woman of color, but all other marginalized peoples in this country, that's not inaccurate, and it's not too far off base. I would say that's a pretty valid criticism, in just my opinion.